Welcome in. It is Big Ten Today. We are presented by Gatorade. It is the Monday Schmooze. Great to have Nicole Auerbach and Howard Griffith alongside. Now, that was fun.
Oh, the second that it was like quad box time, there were 4 games going at once. It was like Christmas morning. It was
nothing
so
better
great.
than watching a lot of football.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and, well, the one thing better than watching a lot of football might be talking about a lot of football.
True.
And that is what we are going to do. We're going to run through the games. It's our big story, the games of the last 4 days in the Big Ten. 11 games in the books now. You take a look at all the scores, 3 conference games. Minnesota, Ohio State, Rutgers all picking up Big Ten victories. As far as the non-conference, all but one of the Big Ten teams won. Purdue fell to a good Fresno State team. Michigan, Penn State both cruising to victories as well. Let's dive in here. We already covered Minnesota and Nebraska in great depth on Friday. And so we're going to move ahead to the games that have been played since we last had a Big Ten Today. So it'll be Friday on. Let's start with the top of the league. Let's start with the 2-time defending Big Ten champs in Michigan. I think some of us may have been surprised at how much more effectively they threw the ball than ran the ball against East Carolina, but it was the first game of 3 without Jim Harbaugh. They really never sweated at all against East Carolina. An impressive performance overall.
Yeah, I mean, you could say it was a little slow, but it never felt like the game was ever going to be in question. And I thought that they did do a really nice job of showing some things in the passing game. Roman Wilson seems to be a really good target for J.J. McCarthy. Like, we've seen this offense use tight ends, but if you're looking for more growth, receivers, breakout receivers, I thought, we wanted to see Blake Corum come back. I think it took a little bit. He hadn't been getting hit and taking tackles, and I think that you definitely saw that as the game wore on. But yeah, I think that was the one surprise, just that it wasn't basically just running the ball over and over and over again like they tend to do in these non-conference games. But I thought there was a lot to like defensively. The nice interception for Mike Sandersill. There was just a lot of good there. It was as if the head coach was there. It was exactly as what you would have expected from Michigan against a opponent like that.
Yeah, and I think they did miss Coach Moore, who was their offensive coordinator and also their offensive line. Grant Newsome was their offensive line coach for this particular game. And, they started a little slow. You're talking about trying to come off the goal line a couple of times. 3 times in a row they were stuffed, weren't able to get any yardage going there. But you're right. We saw a team throw the ball. Last year they just ran, and people were questioning whether or not they could throw it. Today, over the weekend, they proved that they can throw it when they have to. This is a good football team, knew that they were going to try to take the run away, and they were able to start controlling the game with that, but they needed to throw the ball to get some of that pressure out of the box.
What I thought was interesting in the postgame, too, was J.J. McCarthy basically just talking about how different it felt knowing that he was the guy, knowing that he was the starting quarterback, because it's easy to forget now about that back and forth of last season and how that went into the season, because we all felt like they were trying to set it up for J.J. to take the reins and take that job. But that is different coming into the first game, also without your head coach, without your OC, in dealing with all of that. But I thought they handled that really well, and the opportunity that was presented by an opponent like this that was overmatched allowed them to do it.
4 incompletions, 3 touchdown passes. That's pretty good for McCarthy.
He's got to get better. I don't understand. What are you doing, JJ? Come on, my man.
It's got to be 0.
The defense, does it concern you? No sacks. Only 4 tackles for loss. Will Johnson didn't play. Rod Moore didn't play, so you're shorthanded in the secondary. But, East Carolina was a minute away from being shut out. So, again, I feel like we're quibbling, or I'm quibbling, or I'm setting you guys up.
But tell us why we are.
Well, we're quibbling because this is a team that has national championship aspirations.
Right.
So, are they a national championship defense in game 1?
No. Okay, but does it matter? Because they don't get to the championship game in week 1. I think this is going to be a team that's going to continue to develop. This is what they've done. We watched them do it offensively last year. Maybe they need to do it defensively this year. But we know that this is a good team. We know how they want to play the game of football, and it's a physical brand of football. So I'm not concerned at all about the lack of tackles for loss and sacks from this defense. I think they'll be just fine.
Yeah, I agree. And I think when they're fully healthy, if you see a stat line like that, maybe that's more of a concern. But they've got a lot of time to work these things out.
Highest preseason ranking since 1991, and no reason to think they won't remain there going forward here. A good performance in the opener. What about Ohio State? The Buckeyes, the quarterback situation was much scrutinized coming into this year. They ended up going with Kyle McCord. The stat line was not great in the opener. how much do you read into that? Let's start there in our assessment of the Buckeyes.
I'm not going to read a lot into it right now, and I know nationally and obviously in Columbus, people are not happy about what's going on at that position right now, early, but we've seen this before. We've seen the new starting quarterback struggle early when it wasn't perfect, and I think it's just a matter of time. They have to get comfortable with what they're doing. But to me, I think what I was a little concerned about was a little bit of the back and forth with the coaching staff and players and who's calling the plays and who's not calling the plays. That may be a bigger concern moving forward than what we saw from the quarterback. And maybe that's the byproduct of what we saw out of the quarterbacks. But normally we see a very calm sideline. I didn't see that part of it, at least from the TV copy that we were watching. So for me, that's where the more concern is at.
I think that there's, again, it's not like a red flashing light level of concern about the quarterback play because, like you said, when we've seen a lot of these recent megastar quarterbacks at Ohio State, they did struggle in their first outing, or at least it wasn't like the numbers that we've been used to seeing. But I will say that it was apparent the difference in Kyle McCord as a quarterback. 10 yards or further and 10 yards are in. He was way less accurate trying to throw the deep ball. And I think you've got to be concerned if your two best receivers only have 5 catches. Marvin Harrison Jr., yes, we know got a little banged up in that game, but 2 catches, that's not Ohio State's offense functioning at the highest level. This is supposed to be an explosive offense. And so if you're struggling in the deep passing game, that's where I think you can be a little bit concerned or ask questions about.
To your point, one play of 30 yards or longer, they had 42 such plays last year. Offensive line is another area that coming out of camp, I think we wondered a little bit about. McCord had pressure in his face. I mean, this isn't all on the quarterback. And again, it's not a terrible performance. Like, I don't want in any way to, as you say, like, are there huge red flags? I don't know that there are. But coming into this, Ryan Day said he wanted to alternate the quarterbacks a little and give meaningful snaps to Devin Brown. He really wasn't able to do that. He took 6 snaps in the entire game. So I think it's fair to assess that it didn't go exactly according to plan. It did not go according to the plan that was articulated. And that was more of because of systemic struggles offensively. It's not just on the quarterback. It's never just on.
No, it isn't. But they get a lot of the credit, most of the credit, and they get a lot of the blame, which is unfortunate. But that's the position, particularly at Ohio State. They have to get to a point where they just control the games with the offensive line.
Right.
Now, again, we've talked about just how athletic and talented, and you look at the stars, and I still believe in star ratings. You rather have more 4 and 5s than 2s and 3s.
Right.
And that's what Ohio State has. So it's a matter of them, putting it all together. And I'm not sure why it's not working to the extent that we believe that they should be a dominant team, to be able to run the ball whenever they want to, be able to protect the quarterback, not have to necessarily hit the check down or hit your tight ends when you're over the ball. You talk about those passes, 10-yard line of scrimmage to 10 yards. You got to be able to force the ball down the field. That's where this team becomes explosive, because if you're not able to do that, then they're keeping everything in front of them. You're going to have to really be efficient protecting quarterback.
And we saw some good moments out of the run game. And that's where, like, again, it's about imposing it so that in a game like this, again, if you're still working out some things systemically and it's a little disjointed in the passing game, you can just run the ball. But a healthy Travion Henderson, like, that makes a difference. And so you want that piece to come together, too. So, again, it's like uncomfortable. It's not like a concern, but it's something that really does need to adjust because, again, like the best versions of Ohio State's offense are when the deep ball, when Marvin Harrison, when all these pieces allow them to be explosive.
Let's get into the opponent really quickly. Indiana, let's give them some credit on defense. They were much improved. Offensively, they had a lot of problems. Now, we saw, Howard, when we were there at camp, that they were going to run some option. It was pretty clear that this was part of the game plan. It was largely the game plan.
Absolutely.
Against Ohio State. It made sense. I mean, they didn't snap the ball as early as they did last year by any stretch. They milked the snap, the play clock. That helped them a lot, but ultimately not able to muster a whole lot offensively. How much credit goes to Ohio State's defense, and how much of that is Indiana's offense?
Well, I think Indiana's offense trying to control the game the way they did with this offense, it was a big part of it. As you mentioned, this is the way Indiana is going to most likely play football this entire year. But you look at the time of possession, I think they only lost that by maybe 2 or 2.5 minutes. So they did what they needed to. You got to find a way to score points. And it's going to always be difficult against a team like Ohio State, but they weren't able to get to that point. But I give a lot of credit to what Indiana was able to do to really slow the game down and not allow Ohio State to make big plays, and give some credit to the secondary as well. They did an outstanding job in coverage.
I thought it was a really good showing for Ohio State's defense, and we've talked for years now about the questions we've had on that side of the ball. So again, the big test is Michigan, and we'll see what's changed with the defense there. But I thought it was a really good first game for them, and I like that Indiana's trying something different. I'm pro-option. I've always been pro-option. But this was, you had a lot of what we see out Coastal Carolina and out of the shotgun option principles. Like, I think that it's a good thing for Indiana to try something different when you have a schedule like they have.
They have Indiana State next week. I'm fascinated to see kind of what that looks like against the Sycamores, because that's clearly a game where you outman them on paper. Are you able to do a little bit more effectively offensively, but defense a lot better. A lot better, and give credit where it's due there. It is time for our big stats, and that focuses around the Penn State Nittany Lions. It's brought to you by Gatorade. There's been much anticipation of the Drew Aller era in State College, and former 5-star QB did not disappoint Saturday night, throwing for 325 yards, 3 TDs in Penn State's win over West Virginia. He joins Darryl Clark, the only 2 quarterbacks in school history to hit the 300-yard, 3 TD mark in a season opener. Clark did it in his second full year as a starter in 2009. Aller did it in his first game as a starter against West Virginia. He is, at least initially, everything that he was advertised to be.
I thought it was a fantastic first start. I think it was everything that you could have asked for from a quarterback like that in that moment. You saw that the moment wasn't too big for him. I think, his experience that he had last year made him ready for this and not overwhelmed by it. Incredible home atmosphere, by the way. I was on the field for the first drive. I was like, I'll just wait for a touchdown. Came pretty quickly. But it was really methodical. I mean, he was able to, they eased him in with some of the run game, and then he just started to connect with different receivers. And it was really, really impressive, because I think that there's a ton to build off of, and there's definitely some nits to pick. But it showed me that it's his offense. He's ready to do this, and he's ready to use these weapons to take Penn State to the expectations that we all have for them. And I think that we can rightfully talk about this team. If they can beat Michigan, if they can beat Ohio State, they've got the pieces.
He is a top-level quarterback. He has that type of ability to be a first-round draft pick, to do all of those things. He can make all the throws. He understands what he needs to do in the pocket, and we saw some of that this weekend, stepping up in the pocket, not crumbling under pressure. When he gets outside, he can make plays happen, extending plays, and he has so many weapons. It's about being able to utilize those weapons, and he's able to do that. And I think the fact that he was able to get so much time last year in critical moments really helped him for this moment in this particular game, because it's tough when you're coming into a season where now you are the focus and defenses are trying to slow you down. To be able to go out and still be able to execute at a high level is really outstanding. I think the world of him as a player, so I think he's going to continue to grow as the season does.
Talk about those weapons. Keandre Lambert-Smith stepping up as a number 1 receiver. There have been some question as to whether or not that was a role that he could fill, although he looked really good in the Rose Bowl last year. He certainly looked the part in this game. Defensively, what did you take? I mean, there were some really good moments, 3 sacks and 6 tackles for loss, but it didn't feel like a dominant defensive effort. Where were you with
I think I'm where I've been on the other 2 teams. I'm not overly concerned. I know how talented this roster is. I know the type of job that Manny Diaz has done, and the type of players that are there right now that can be elite and will be elite. I think it's first game jitters, if you want to call it that. Attention to detail will be important, and I think they'll continue to ramp things up as the season goes. But I'm not concerned at all for the first week with them.
James Franklin made a point after the game that he thinks West Virginia is going to be a little bit of a problem for some other people as well. And I think that's true. Quarterback play in the run game that we saw from West Virginia, I was more impressed that they stayed in the game as long as they did, considering where I think that team is. So I actually took a little bit more out of that I was impressed at what West Virginia did more than I was concerned about Penn State's D.
Yeah, I mean, there's two sides to all this. You're playing a Power 5 team. It's not going to be a completely clean sheet here where every single play goes exactly your way. A little surprising. Abdul Carter, 1 tackle, like stuff like that's a little surprising. But again, it's a very long season. Now, Howard, Phil Longo said from the moment he was introduced that if they had the opportunity, they were going to run the ball. He said he would be a fool if with those running backs and those offensive linemen, he did not run the ball. But you hear air raid, and you think the days of 312 rushing yards may be behind us. They are not. Those backs, Malusi was healthy again and looked great. Braylon Allen is who he is. This was vintage Wisconsin. It's what they do.
James White's in the green room with us now. Yes. He's our colleague, and he's obviously a great back. He's what air raid, right? We're running the rock, but this is what's interesting, right? We talked about this on the offensive side. They're going to be this other team. They want to throw it around. They want to spread you out. But when you have the talent you have in a room, you have to utilize that. Now, what that looks like in a year from now, or even later in the season, may be something different. But if you have the type of backs that they have right now on that roster with this offensive line, you take advantage of them. And the backs have told us, they said, hey, it just means we're going to have more space to make people miss. And that's literally what happened. You might have a safety trying to make a play one-on-one, not going to make it against those guys. Linebackers are going to struggle, and that's what we saw them able to do, really be able to control the game at the line of scrimmage.
And as you pointed out, potential breakout plays because you're able to get past different layers of the defense. And I think that they probably love that we've all been talking about the air raid nonstop all off season because then they can do this and surprise everybody, and maybe they're going to do that to some defenses too. But I absolutely agree, Howard. I mean, you're playing to your strengths. Why wouldn't you use these running backs the way that they were?
Yeah.
And I think it's fair to point out that Tanner Mordecai still completed 24 passes, which is the most by a Badger quarterback in his debut since at least 1968. He had a beautiful deep ball to Skylar Bell, I believe, that was dropped that would have been a touchdown. But they did only complete 3 passes of 15 air yards or longer. And so that is I think that's the one thing that I should say they only attempted 3 of 15 yards or longer. So that is the one thing where when you think air raid, we saw a wide receiver group that was really impressive when we were there. They didn't necessarily try to throw the ball down the field as much as you would expect. But again, it feels like you're going to take what the defense gives you.
Yeah, completely. And I think that that's really good to have that type of balance because when you think about the way that Wisconsin's been the last couple of years in the shortcomings at the quarterback position, it was that they didn't really have that type of passing game and everyone knew you were going to run the ball like that. And so I think that is where you're going to see the growth. If they can be a balanced offense, I think they would love to have that this season.
You talk about now you're looking at a team where they're going to run the rock down us. They're going to really be physical with us. And next thing you know, they can spread you out and go vertically with the football, and quarterback takes care of the football. That's what you need to be able to do.
I'd like to point out that we did our preseason helmet stickers last week, and I gave one to Braylon Allen because I said, don't forget about the running backs.
You did.
Don't forget about them.
Give credit where credit is due. They head to Washington State on Saturday. That's going to be a challenging game. Washington State looked pretty good.
Yeah, they look good
on Saturday, so that'll be a tough one there for Wisconsin, at least on paper. Okay, Iowa. There was no offense more scrutinized in the offseason than Iowa's. They end up scoring 24 points. They need to average 25. They could have kicked the field goal. On the last play, they took a knee, right? So again, sportsmanship prevails in Iowa City. But you had to be encouraged. Those first 2 drives, Cade McNamara, it's the first time they'd thrown a touchdown pass on their opening drive since, 1991? I mean, it's crazy, opening drive of a season. So that part feels good. They scored on their first 2 possessions, and then it petered off a little bit. So what do we make of the Hawkeyes' offensive attack?
Well, that stat felt like the most Iowa offensive stat, right? Like it sounded right, it felt right, and I think that that's what showed that spark, and that's why people were so excited about what they were seeing in those opening drives. We've said this all along because of what we saw with Cade McNamara at Michigan, but this is an offense that even if you stay with the same scheme, but you're upgrading at the quarterback position and you're upgrading at certain other spots, and like Eric All, we saw him as a tight end also coming over from Michigan, they're going to do more. And it was really energizing and exciting to see that on the opening drive. And, I made a joke, certainly after the first 2 drives, like, oh, Brian Ferentz just going to run it up here, right? And then they didn't get to 25 and whatever that is. But I think you've got to be excited. And Cade McNamara wasn't fully healthy in the preseason, so it can only go up from here as he gets more and more reps in the offense.
I think timing became an issue. I think early in the game you understand the plays that are going to be called because you're trying to set the defense up so you know what it's going to look like. Once you start to get later into the game, now it turns into a flow, and you can tell that the flow wasn't there. And I think part of that is because he wasn't able to practice as much as they would have obviously liked him to practice during training camp. But this is a much better team. But you know what's still solid? The defensive side of the ball.
And special teams. That's why it's just about getting improvement on that side of the ball. And then we're going to be talking about them as a West contender again.
And one area they really needed to improve was the offensive line. It was a lot better. Gave up 1 sack. Remember, they gave up 38 last year.
It's a bit of a problem.
So if that group is better, that will help them immensely. Michigan State played on Friday. They took on Central Michigan. A sluggish start for the Spartans, but a strong finish. Scored the game's final 28 points. Noah Kim, up and down, certainly did not start well at all at the quarterback spot, but I think the theme of this game was second half better than the first.
Did you steal a look at my notes? I wrote Noah Kim had an up and down day. That's exactly how I looked at it too, but he did get better as the game went on. And really so did Michigan State as the game went on. And I think that's where you get excited about it and you're looking for optimism, especially coming off that Florida State game, by the way, because I think otherwise you're very frustrated about seeing Keon Coleman go for 3 touchdowns against LSU. But you are looking at the pieces that you have and a lot of inexperienced players stepping into these bigger roles like Noah Kim. And again, the way that they finished, I thought was impressive, and the defense, I thought, took a lot of positives out of it. 3 for 15 on 3rd down for Central Michigan. That's a really important stat for this defense. So again, I think there's a lot that you can look at and say, okay, if we can continue to do that, we should be okay.
Getting something out of the run game, obviously important for Michigan State. And I think it's a matter of them, everyone's trying to get comfortable in their positions where they are right now. And part of it is, first game. But as you talked about, the second half was really more important than the first half was because they were able to, really settle down as a team and be able to make the plays that were needed.
You mentioned the run game, Nathan Carter, the UConn transfer. I mean, no one's going to be Kenneth Walker III here, and I think we need to understand that is a player that you're not going to find very often in the portal, a player of that caliber. But Carter looked good, really good, and helping out with Jalen Berger there, and you could see a run game starting to come together. So I think a lot to be encouraged by with Michigan State. And yes, I looked at your notes. I mean, I haven't had an original thought. Howard knows this. I mean, I haven't had an original thought in 17 years. You think I'm going to start
why start today?
I had trouble reading your handwriting at times.
The schmooze is like we have groupthink. We're all the mind meld is happening.
Yes, we're all on the same page in the Monday schmooze. What about Illinois and Toledo? Illinois was, to say they were fortunate to win
would be an understatement.
It would be an understatement, but they won. And you know what? Luke Altmaier came in, and I think that was one of the better quarterback debuts that we saw this weekend. And not just, he stood in there on a 4th and 4 and delivered a ball that he later admitted he didn't even see it. He had no idea where it was going, right? He threw it up there.
Let's put it up.
Hoping he'd make a play on it, and he did. But, man, he can run. He is a good athlete. I understand the defense was not nearly where it was a year ago, and that's a concern.
Go ahead and finish.
But, man, I come out of that really encouraged. I come out encouraged by their resilience. I come out feeling better about the quarterback play. All due respect to Tommy DeVito. I think there might be more upside here to Altmaier, particularly given the fact he's got a few years of eligibility left here. So if I'm an Illinois fan, I'm thinking, or an Illinois player or coach, I'm thinking, okay, lucky to win maybe. Fortunate to win might be a better word. But, man, there's a lot to build on here.
And you probably could look back to last year and say if they were in this position last year, we might have lost that game.
Yeah. Every game they lost was by single margin last year.
To be able to step in and have a quarterback to deliver the ball the way he did, the way he was able to maneuver, use his legs to play, get the running game going a little bit, I think defensively, we would expect them to have some challenges, right? You've got a new defensive coordinator, you've got new parts. Yes, you have two of the best defensive linemen in college football on that defense, but it still takes time. And they found themselves going against a really good Toledo team. First of all, this is a good offensive line that they have over in Toledo. They can move the ball offensively, but there's a lot to build on, as you mentioned. You come out of this thing with a win. You've got the players' attention because the way you won the game. So it's a better situation for them moving forward having to coach this week.
Toledo is a good team. Toledo could win the MAC. And we know that good MAC teams are right in the mix, right in the bottom of the Big Ten type teams. And so I think it was really impressive to be able to pull out that win, but it wasn't like this would have been embarrassing or anything, or that they struggled, that they needed this at the end of the game to come out. I think it was a good team that they were playing, and I agree with everything you said about the offense and what it means to have maybe a higher ceiling out of the quarterback position. Escapability is so big in today's game, and so extending those plays, giving yourself a chance, even if you can't see where the ball's going, that is going to be huge. How many times have we seen Caleb Williams do this? Like he extends plays so much longer, and it gives you a chance on plays that other quarterbacks can't make.
Outgained by 42 yards. They gave up more points than they did in all but one game last year. Toledo had 8 more first downs. They've got a really tough game coming up on Friday against Kansas. That is, I think it's one of the sneaky good non-conference games in all of college football. But they learned a lot about themselves, and when you can learn a lot and do it when you win a game, that's really positive. I know Brett feels good about his team this year, and they'll be in that hunt, no doubt, in the Big Ten West. Talia Tagovailoa opened the season by throwing for 260 yards and 3 touchdowns for Maryland, running for a score as well as the Terps blew out Towson. Tagovailoa, who became Maryland's all-time passing yardage leader last season, now over 8,000 yards for his career. Not the greatest opposition out there, nor are they supposed to be. I don't say that in a negative way about Towson. They're a middle-of-the-road team in a FCS conference. That being said, you can still learn a lot in an opener. What did we learn about Maryland?
Well, he's still a great quarterback. And we knew that, and that's part of the reason I think we're all really excited to see this team. But I loved that there were 3 different wide receivers who caught touchdown passes, a lot of different players and playmakers involved in that offense, and so I think that's a good warm-up.
Yeah, I thought one of the things that was impressive was the touchdown that he ran for. Because normally when he pulls the ball down and wants to scramble, he's still trying to force the ball down the field, but he used his legs and he was able to score a touchdown with that. I think if they can utilize his legs at some point during the season, that makes him an even more dangerous quarterback, because I think he can, as we know, we can make all the throws. He knows how to make plays. He has the weapons at the wide receiver position. Defensively, they've gotten better. I really like this team where they are right now.
I really like their schedule. I mean, I think it gives them a very good chance to start the year at 5-0.
Which is where they need to be.
Yeah,
right?
And then you'd really start to get into some heavily hyped games and start to get some genuine excitement in College Park. They've got Charlotte coming up next, and then Virginia. The Virginia game, I think, is a really compelling game.
A good one.
Be a good gauge for them to see where they are. But as we know, Virginia, a team picked towards the bottom of the ACC this year. So, again, Maryland has to feel good about that 1-0 start. What about Purdue? This is the only Big Ten team that lost to a non-conference foe. I think it's fair to point out they're playing Fresno State, who had won 9 straight games coming in. They were the Mountain West champs last year. You have a fabulous offensive coach in Jeff Tedford, so that part of the matchup to me was really intriguing coming in. Jeff Tedford and his offense against Ryan Walters and his defense. I think the issue is Jeff Tedford's had more time to work with his offense than Ryan Walters had to work with his D. And it became pretty clear that Purdue is a work in progress, but nearly pulled this game out.
Yeah, and I think because they have a quarterback that's going to be able to make plays for them, they'll be able to do that. McAfee had a really big-time run where he makes a guy miss, runs in for a touchdown. But we're talking about on the defensive side, and they were schemed up really well. And they have 2 really good safeties at Purdue. And they were put in some tough situations versus slot receivers where they had to cover them one-on-one, and those slot receivers were able to win. So I think if they had it to do over again, they might find a way to get those guys some more help if they could, or play a different coverage. But I thought Fresno State did an outstanding job of really putting Purdue in tough positions and making their players play out of position.
Well, I wanted to ask you about that because, you have a defensive guy who's a head coach for the first time, first game.
Yeah.
And that's the side of the ball that we have some questions about because also every time Purdue took the lead, they gave it, they gave up a scoring drive. So how much can a defensive guy do as the head coach? Should he be more involved in calling the defense? Like, what do you think changes coming out of this?
Well, I think it's ultimately a work in progress. I think you're trying to find out exactly where the sweet spot is as far as being the head coach. And I think Coach Walters would look at this week and say, well, maybe I should be more involved on the defensive side because he wasn't calling plays in this game. But I think he probably will have more input when he starts to look back at the film and sees what he has an opportunity to do. But it is very tricky to be a defensive guy and try to be able to control the entire game as the head coach when you know you may need to give more help to your defensive staff. And that's one of those things that's going to be a work in progress, and they've got to find the sweet spot. But I think this still is a very good football team.
It would be nice if they had an easier non-conference schedule.
Yeah.
I mean, it is
I cannot believe
really,
this.
They do this a lot. I mean,
Yeah, they do.
This is kind of their MO.
But oh my goodness, having to go into Virginia Tech this week and then Syracuse, but like the environment that they're going to be walking into this week is one of the most challenging in college football when the Hokies are good, but even when they're not good, it's still intimidating. This is going to be a big test.
Yeah, I think it's still, again, I still believe this is a really good football team because of the signal caller that they have is going to keep them in a lot of games. They'll make the adjustments that they need to defensively to be just fine. They just found themselves in a situation where they were not able to make the plays when they needed to in this game.
Now, 371 passing yards allowed. It would be nice to have a game against an FCS team that you know that you can beat. Yeah. Just to kind of figure some things out, to build some confidence,
all of that.
All of that kind of stuff would be really nice. But the schedule is what the schedule
set.
is.
Go play them, boys.
Rutgers, Northwestern. So that game was yesterday. Let's start with Rutgers. First two drives, 16 plays each. Gavin Wimsatt surgically picking Northwestern apart. This was offensively about as good on those first two drives as we've seen Rutgers look against a Big Ten team really that I can remember. I mean, I'm sure there's a diehard Rutgers fan out there who's going to point out a game to me from a few years ago. But like for those first two drives, everything seemed to work. They got to fourth down. They were able to convert. It was really impressive.
Coach Shiraka really, I thought, did an outstanding job of calling this game. And then I think the other important part is you named your starting quarterback when you named him. And why that's important for the confidence for not only the player, but also the team. You know that you can still go make mistakes and know that you're not going to get yanked. And that's important for young quarterbacks to be in that situation because it wasn't perfect. But to be able to go for it, know you're going to be going for it on fourth down and being able to convert, being able to use your legs to extend plays, coming up with big plays. I thought this is the way I think they are going to play and call the game the entire year. We talked a little bit about Indiana and how they were going to call the game. This is similar. When I was watching Rutgers call this game offensively, this is what Indiana wants to do. Different style, but this is what they want to do. Did an outstanding job of it.
Yeah, it felt like it was the first time in forever that the quarterback position was settled for Rutgers going into the first game, and it was settled months ago. So you definitely saw that confidence come out. And then just to control the clock the way that they did, that just puts Northwestern's defense on their heels, and they're exhausted basically by halftime when the time of possession is so uneven. I just thought it was the exact perfect start that you wanted for Rutgers, and then for Northwestern, it was like the exact opposite start that you would actually want to have happen.
Rutgers ran 32 of the first 37 plays in this game.
Can't be better than that.
No, I mean, it really was impressive. And then their defense, and again, look, they were aided and abetted by Northwestern, and we'll talk about Northwestern in a minute. But defensively, gave up the fewest yards that they have given up in a Big Ten game. They gave up 12 rushing yards, which was far and away the fewest they've given up in a Big Ten game. And they essentially came one play
away from a shutout.
From having their first shutout in a Big Ten game. Greg Schiano is a very good defensive coach. This was a solid defense last year. It was a good defense at the beginning of last year. By the end of the year, I think they got worn down because they were on the field so much.
Injuries,
But he's a really good defensive coach. Joe Harris-Simiak doing a nice job there, and Northwestern couldn't do anything. But again, give credit to Rutgers.
And I know you're not slighting him by saying he's a good defensive coach. He's a good coach because he knows exactly the way he needs to call a game and coach a team to be able to win where they are right now. So he's putting his team in the best position to be winners. And calling the game offensively the way it did, that's what you have to do. Shorten the game. Allow your offense to be methodical up and down the field. You know that you're going to be going for it on fourth down. So that changes your play calling on second down, knowing that you're actually going to have 4 downs to do some things. So it was really impressive what they were able to do. And to me, it speaks to having the right person at the helm of your program to really build your program. It's just going to still take some time, but they are headed in the right direction without a doubt.
It was a complete game. It was a complete win. And I can't think about the last time where they looked so good in all of those phases. And again, it was kind of a shame they didn't get that shutout, right? Because it felt like it was maybe the best game that they've played as a Big Ten member. And they needed that. It was an opportunity for them with where Northwestern was this season, but it's a great start to the season, and it gets your fan base excited. It gets you going. It gets the juices flowing, and you need that because we have seen different steps of growth under Greg Schiano in the second return. Like the defense last year, I thought was really a high point in certain games, and against Ohio State at times in some of those games. But this was a complete win, and I thought that was really, really impressive walking away from that game.
Just their 6th ever Big Ten home win as a conference member. They're 6-35. So a complete win for Rutgers, a complete disaster for Northwestern, frankly. I mean, it could not have gone worse if you look at the way they played on the field. And I think it's fair to point out, because there's been so much turmoil this offseason, and I think they did have some incoming freshmen who left the program. I think a handful of them. But they had one player who they were counting on to play who left. Everyone could have left, only one left. Now that speaks to David Braun, and I think he is to be commended. But this is the team they were going to take the field with under Pat Fitzgerald. Like, this is what it was. And you look at how outplayed they were on both lines of scrimmage. I mean, he was 4-20 his last 2 years. Like, let's not forget that. And part of the reason he was 4-20 is because they didn't have a lot of great players.
Yeah, the roster certainly looked as it has the last couple of years, and that just limits what you're able to try to do offensively. It limits what you're able to do defensively. And again, that defense got tired too, because they were out on the field the entire first quarter, so much of the first half. But, we didn't see a lot out of Ben Bryant at quarterback. We saw a lot of mistakes. We've seen a lot of mistakes at the quarterback position the last couple of years. And then, you just think about motivation, too, coming off of the turmoil in the offseason for those players, for the coaching staff, that they don't know what their future is. I just think it was a recipe for that disaster that we saw.
You mentioned coming off the turmoil. It's still going on. Right? They're still having to deal with this. So I'm not at all shocked at the performance. When you couple that with what the roster was looking like anyway, this is going to be a tough year for Northwestern and its fan base and it already has been. But all you can do is, go coach, go play, and try to limit your mistakes. But this is going to be tough.
The one positive would be defensively, they didn't give up a play longer than 20 yards. And you think of how they got carved up on defense in recent years. Maybe there's something that you hang your hat on in the post-O'Neal era that they got things, at least they were in the right place. They just couldn't make any plays on fourth down on those first two drives, and ultimately that's what did them in. But it's a little bit of a mess, to say the least. Each and every week here on Big Ten Today, we hand out helmet stickers for the best performances, eagerly anticipated by all throughout the conference. You each choose 3. Nicole, why don't you lead us off?
All right, we've talked about him a little bit on today's show, but Keandre Lambert-Smith, he was excellent in Penn State's game. We talked about Drew Aller. He's going to get all the headlines, but Penn State may have found their number one receiver. They have, literally, but also figuratively. After this performance, 123 yards, 2 touchdowns. He might be the go-to guy.
Somebody had to throw the ball, so it was Drew, right? 21 of 29 for 325, 3 touchdowns. He was also able to maneuver in the pocket. I really like his upside. Outstanding game by the young fella.
All right, my second helmet sticker is going to another receiver.
Okay.
Another number one receiver, it appears. Michigan, Roman Wilson, 3 touchdowns, 1 touchdown in each of the first 3 quarters. And by the way, he had 4 starts last year, only 4 touchdowns. So I think he's going to be the guy, and he's going to be JJ's favorite target.
Tyler Nubin in Minnesota. He's my guy.
Yeah.
For a lot of reasons, but he's my
been.
guy.
Yes.
He's been my guy for a long time. 2 touchdowns. 2 interceptions, big time interceptions when the team was driving. They came up with some huge plays to give the ball back to Minnesota and really slow some of those drives down. So Tyler Nubin with the helmet sticker.
All right, my last sticker is going to Gavin Wimsatt. We were just talking about him, but he controlled the game from the jump. We saw a ton of confidence with him in the passing game, but also with his legs, and that was just a great win for him and for Rutgers. So whenever we can get a helmet sticker to Rutgers, we get a helmet sticker out there.
And you said 3. This week it's 4. Malusi and Allen have to be my
You
guys.
can't follow directions.
Already, right out of the gate, he can't. He's
Yeah,
not following the rules.
It's simple, but you got 2 backs go over 100
Unbelievable.
yards. You know, Malusi goes for 157, 2 touchdowns. Allen for 144, 2 touchdowns. In the air raid offense.
Yes. I
was
was saying this,
groundbreaking.
if they can keep Malusi fully healthy, wow. And by the way, they did not face a single 8-man box in that game. Not one.
Okay.
Interesting.
And you think about Braylon Allen had 20 more carries into 8-man boxes than any back in
Can't
America.
do it. Don't
Last
get down
year
there.
they faced 0. So that tells you what the threat of the air raid did. A thorough domination by the Trojans. They are 2-0. They will host Stanford coming up on Saturday at the Coliseum. They are in good company. How about this? USC, UCLA, Oregon, and Washington, all winners on Saturday. They combined for nearly 58 points per game. Now, it was distorted somewhat by Oregon putting up 81,
Yeah.
but even still, offensively, all 4 of these teams seem to be in midseason form.
Well, they got great quarterbacks. And Michael Penix Jr., I thought, was phenomenal in their opener. And they played against a Boise State team that might win the Mountain West. So that was really impressive. Caleb Williams is a highlight reel. He is a walking highlight reel. And to Dave's point, I have no idea how you defend him.
Yeah. You watch him make plays with his legs, and he's still trying to get the ball down the field. He made a play where he's literally jumping out of bounds, and it was a perfect throw down the sideline in that game as well. So Big Ten fans are happy that he won't be in the conference next year.
That's true.
Yes,
That's
I don't
true.
think
Tell you that much.
there's no great risk of that. Dante Moore at UCLA. I mean, they were in a little bit of a battle against Coastal Carolina, and then Dante Moore was very highly recruited, as anyone who follows that realm of football knows, comes in and throws 2 big touchdown passes. So you talk about like all 3 of those other teams probably have a Heisman candidate this year.
Yeah.
UCLA may have a Heisman candidate here in years to come.
I think this is where fans really have to dial in. I think they are for the most part when you think about it. When you have a difference maker under center, that changes everything about your program. And you've watched this happen at Washington, which has been unbelievable. Caleb Williams going from Oklahoma to USC has been remarkable. So you got to have the person under center that can help you win football games.
And he wasn't the starting quarterback. He wasn't named the starter of that game, but he certainly seems to be his offense now. And everyone was excited for him to get there, and you saw why. I mean, the quarterbacks in the Pac-12 this season, especially these 4 schools, really special.
Yeah, no doubt. It is going to be, obviously, it's the final year of the Pac-12, but it is going to be a special year of Pac-12 football, and a lot of it has to do with the teams that are coming into the Big Ten. Bo Nix in that quarterback conversation as well. I mean, Oregon scores 81 points.
He's already got the billboard.
Right.
He's ready. He's ready.
He's
The
ready to
Heisman
go.
campaign has already been
In the
launched.
modern era. We did not get to talk about Deion Sanders.
Oh, and the unbelievable job that program did going down in TCU. Huh?
Now that was the story of the
Colorado.
week.
I'm not sure Nebraska fans were particularly enthused. What else in college
Get ready.
football was fired
It's
up?
going to be a fun one.
Wani joins me tomorrow. See you then.